Hey everybody, welcome to Skype a Scientist Live. We're so glad that you're here to talk about snails and endangered animals and what we can do to help them. I love snails, particularly abalone. They're so beautiful. I love them so much. And so I'm a squid biologist, so all of the inverts are just near and dear to my heart. So things that you should know, next week, we've got 3 Skype a Scientist Live sessions. We are gonna be talking about science that you can do at home, so like little science experiments and stuff that you can do from your kitchen. That's going to be on Monday, May 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern. On May 19th, Tuesday, we're going to be talking about vaccines with a vaccine scientist, Devika Varma. On the 22nd, which is a Friday, we're going to be hearing from Stacy Phillips all about how to make a mountain. Stacy is one of the most passionate, entertaining people I've ever seen, particularly with geology. She's amazing. So if geology doesn't sound interesting to you, show up anyway, because Stacy is so great and we like her so much. So that's what's up next week. As always, Thursday nights we have trivia night, and that helps support our program financially. It's $5 to play, and it's really fun. We have a great time. We really like talk. It's just like a good time for adults to nerd out about science together. It's lovely. And so other than that, we are a nonprofit organization. And so if you can support us, we'd really appreciate it. It really, we couldn't exist without people supporting us like you. So even small donations are really helpful. You can do that at paypal.me or paypal.me/Skype-a-Scientist or patreon.com/Skype-a-Scientist. That is all the housekeeping I have for you today. So let's get into some snails. So Alyssa, do you want to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and why you like it?
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm part of Team White Abalone, and our whole goal is to save this species called white abalone, which is an endangered species and needs a little help to come back. So abalone are ocean snails. I don't actually have any white abalone shells with me because I've been at home for the last 2 months, but I have 2 other kinds of abalone shells with me. So this one here is a black abalone. You can see that it's black on the outside, and this one here is an abalone from New Zealand. And I did my PhD work on these, partly on these ones, but they're shaped kind of like they're like a snail, but shaped kind of like a hamburger. And I'm not going to say that's the reason why they don't exist anymore, but it has something to do with it. So these animals were overfished a lot in the 1900s, and white abalone, we only had 1% of abalone left in the wild after the overfishing pressures happened. And so that's not very many. The problem for white abalone, even after they were listed as an endangered species, was that they were so far apart from each other that they couldn't make new white abalone. So the way that they reproduce is they have these little holes in their shell. I don't know if you can see them. And abalone will poof out into the ocean, either eggs or sperm, and they will mix in the water, make new little abalone, and then they'll settle down to the bottom. But what happens if they're really far apart is those eggs and sperm never find each other. And so we never get new white abalone. So right now, that's the situation that's in the wild. We haven't had any new white abalone come from wild reproduction that we know of since 2001. And that was when they got listed on the endangered species list. They were the first ocean invertebrate to be listed on the endangered species list. And then black abalone was the second. And so what we're doing is we're breeding as many babies as we can, doing a lot of research about them to try and make as many as we can to put them back out into the wild, so that problem where they're too far apart from each other isn't there anymore, and they can make their own baby white abalone, hopefully, in the future. And so we have a lot of animals in the lab, and every spring we spawn them. So we try to make lots of baby abalone, we grow them up, and with the help of partners from all over the state who help grow our white abalone and put them out into the wild. And last year was the first year in the history of the program where abalone got to go from captivity back into the wild. So it's kind of a big time for white abalone restoration right now. I think with that, maybe I should take some questions.
Okay, I'm no longer muted. That helps. Okay, we're so ready for some abalone questions. So our first question from J-Rob, who comes to almost all these sessions, a real devotee of Skype a Scientist Live. How many types of snails are there?
Types of snails? Oh gosh, you stumped me with question one. I have no idea. Thousands, tens of thousands, probably more than that.
Lots of
abalone.
snails.
And in California, we have about 7 species of abalone.
Cool.
But that's a very specific kind, and they all look very similar to this. They're nice and flat. They get to be big. I brought one other prop the size of a dinner plate or bigger. Wow. So this is a 10-inch plate, and white abalone can get to be 10 inches long. They might be a little bit more shaped like an oval, but red abalone can get even bigger, like 2 inches bigger than that.
Awesome. So how long would it take an abalone? Like, let's say they're eating well. How long does it take them to get that size?
I don't know if we really know. It takes white abalone about 4 to 6 years in the wild, just until they can make their own baby abalone. But they don't need to be full size to do that. And then they can live between 35 and 40 years in the wild, we think. I don't think we really know how long all the species of abalone live in the wild. I mean, red abalone get bigger, maybe they live longer. But when we're eating an abalone that's the size of a dinner plate, it's probably been alive for a few decades.
Wow, impressive. How long have you been working on abalone?
Since 2014.
Awesome.
So 6 years.
Cool. So how long, so you're breeding them in captivity, the eggs and the sperm are meeting in the lab. How long do you keep them in the lab before you then release them into the wild?
So we don't want to put out like itty bitty tiny abalone because we don't know, they would be impossible to go and find again and see if they're still growing or tag them or anything like that. And it really depends. So last year was the first year that they got out into the wild. And so this year is only the second year that we're thinking about putting animals out in the wild. And I'll be honest, I started here a month after the first outplanting, which is like the first time that they went out into the wild.
Wow.
I wasn't part of that decision-making process, but they get to live in the lab for a few years until they're robust enough basically to go out in the wild. So I think this year, maybe we'll put out some animals from like 2 or 3 years ago.
Cool.
Hopefully.
That's awesome. Crossing our fingers that they do okay. So is it legal then to catch and eat an abalone?
No. So white abalone have been listed as an endangered species since 2001, but the fishery itself closed, I forget the exact date, but sometime in the 90s.
Okay. Cool.
Red abalone used to be the only species that you could fish for in California. Mm-hmm. And a few years ago, I don't want to get the date wrong, it was 2017, I think, anyway, they made a decision recently in the last few years to kind of put a pause on the red abalone fishery. In history, there used to be commercial fisheries of giant piles of shells. I mean, it was amazing how many abalone they could catch. And then when the fishery started to collapse, they switched it just to recreational fishery, which means that only like you and me could go out. If we had a fishing license, we could go out and catch a few animals for us to eat, not for selling. And the last time that you could do that was a few years ago. And the state put a pause on that because the abalone haven't been doing very well out in the wild. And that's just red abalone. And we're still waiting to see. Hopefully they can come back before the fishery reopens. There's a ton of scientists working on solving the red abalone problem as well. White abalone, I can't imagine we'll be fishing for them anytime in the near future because we have a lot of recovery to do before we have that population up. But that's the goal, is to get the animals recovered to the point where it used to be, where you
Right.
could go out and fish sustainably for them.
Cool. Do you have any other types of animals in the lab other than white abalone?
So our program is just white abalone. We're breeding white abalone. We do experiments on them to see like how well they're going to do with climate change, or what can we do to help them make more and more white abalone babies. And sometimes that means that we use other species of abalone, like red abalone, because those animals are also really important, not just for the ecosystem in California, and they're declining and we want to see them come back, but they're also, those are the species, that is the species that's used in aquaculture. So that means like on land farms that are growing abalone have red abalone in them. And so sometimes when we do experiments on both of them, they can inform what's happening with the other one.
Awesome. Anisha would like to know, what are baby abalone called?
So they have different life stages. They start out as a little kind of embryo, and then a larva in the water, and then they settle down onto the floor. The larval stage is called a veliger, I think is how you pronounce it, Veliger. It's really cute. I don't have a photo of it. Yeah, they're like these tiny little round animals that almost look like they have tentacles coming out. They almost look like a squid. I mean, I guess kind of, they're like that, a squid shape, because they're round and they kind of come out the one side. But then again, they're all mollusks, so yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, they're kind of closely related. I mean, compared to an elephant or a fish. Yeah.
Or us.
Or us, yeah. Totally. How far can a snail go in an hour? I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never measured that. Let's think. I think that a snail could go pretty far in an hour if it really wanted to. Say, white abalone are really lazy. They wait for their food to come to them. Red abalone will go and crawl for kelp. Mm-hmm. White abalone just kind of sit on a rock, and they'll sit there forever and just wait. And like if kelp comes by, they'll eat it, and if it doesn't, then like potentially they'll just die. Like that's how lazy they are. They don't really move a lot. Right. We can like place, and NOAA has done this. NOAA is a government agency that monitors abalone. They could put cameras out in the wild, and you can just watch the same abalone sitting on the same rock, and the camera's just sitting there, and it won't go anywhere. I mean, it'll move around a little bit, and if something comes by that it wants to eat, it'll reach out and grab it, but that's it.
It's not moving around much. I bet the fastest snail would probably be one of the pteropods, maybe. So there are some snails sit on the seafloor, and some snails like swim. They're like up and moving. They kind of look like, if you've ever seen Harry Potter and the Golden Snitch, like imagine a black tiny golden snitch. They are goofy looking and so cute, and they look like little baby bats, and I bet they move the fastest if I were to take a wild guess in what I know about invertebrate zoology, but I don't really know. All right.
Or like maybe the ones that like a cone snail, like the predatory snails that like reach out and grab something like a fish, like that movement is probably really fast.
That's fast for sure. So yeah, cone snails are amazing, and they have these little needles that shoot venom into fish. Cool. So one of the questions from Anisha was, some people think that snails are boring, but are they really boring? And I think that kind of addresses that. Like, we have venom needle shooting snails, we've got swimming snails, we have snails that you can make jewelry out of. Like, they're not boring at all, right?
Yeah, and ours have sorry, move my face. I'm just trying to pull up, see if I can show it. Now I'm on my phone, but I can probably flip the camera to my screen. I don't know if you'll, since
I
my
can
video
see
is
that,
probably
yeah.
not great. But this is not a white abalone. This is a paua. This is from New Zealand. And you can see its little face here. Like, these are its eyes. They're not sometimes when you go to feed an abalone, it'll come out and reach its little muscle out and pull on the food. I think they have personalities, so maybe I'm just a weirdo, but whatever.
That's great. Did you know abalone existed before you started studying them?
That is a funny question. Not really. So I am from the East Coast of the U.S. We don't have abalone on the East Coast of the U.S., at least not, kind of along there might be, I'm thinking maybe now that there might be some in the tropics, but they'd be tiny. But anyway, along where I'm from, there are no abalone. And I went to New Zealand to do research for a year. And I just like fell in love with them. I mean, look how beautiful that is. They're just cool little animals. They have cool stories behind them. And the stories that people tell about them are really compelling. And so that's where I got interested in them. And then I moved to California for my PhD, and my PhD wasn't supposed to be on abalone. And I walked in my advisor's office and I was like, look, I know I said I would do this project, but I've like really fallen in love with abalone. So I'm going to study abalone instead. And I guess I got lucky because he was like, okay, sure, whatever.
Great.
Let me go with it. Yeah. So.
That's great. So what do abalone eat?
They eat all different kinds of algae, so like seaweeds, like kelp. Red abalone like to crawl up and eat the blades of kelp, or like when it's fallen to the floor. White abalone will eat drift kelp, which means kelp that's broken off of the ocean floor and is floating along, and they'll kind of reach out and grab it. But they also eat other types of algae. And in the lab, we give them kind of a diverse diet depending on what we can get from the ocean for them.
Cool. Let's see. Do you have a favorite type of abalone or snail?
Oh, okay. Well, I would be betraying the white abalone if I didn't say that they were my favorite. But I love them all. They're so cute. They all are. I mean, I don't think the only one I've never seen, I guess, alive in person is a black abalone. No, that's not true. I saw one in the wild, and it was so exciting because it's an endangered species, and I saw one in the wild. Yeah, I love them all. They're all adorable in their own special way.
That's awesome. So when you're out in the field, how do you find abalone?
So white abalone live in the deepest water. So like from 40 meters or yards down to like 100 or something like that. So you can't see them in the wild without scuba diving. And even if you could go and look and scuba dive for them, the people who go and do that are like trained to do it. They've been scuba diving forever. They're just like really, really amazing at finding abalone. I think I could be scuba diving for a year and probably never find one myself. Like I would never be able to see that kind of thing because they camouflage really well and they decorate their shells with algae and stuff like that. Well, they don't do it themselves, but they allow it to grow. But something like a black abalone, so this one lives in the intertidal, and when they weren't endangered, they used to be able to find them in the intertidal. Same with sometimes red abalone. So the intertidal is like the zone between where the water is at high tide and low tide, and so you can potentially walk out there and see them. But the other problem is that they live in really kind of like rough, rocky shores. They're not very safe places to be like climbing around on rocks. Yeah.
Cool. Why do you enjoy your job? Like, what's your favorite part about your job?
So my job is to figure out how to make, or to try and help figure out how to make as many white abalone babies as possible. And so for me, it's kind of this job is kind of like a calling. You know, white abalone were eaten into non-existence, basically. That's our fault. And so what I enjoy about it is that I'm giving back by trying to help restore this. But I also get to work with really cool people and really cool abalone. So
that's awesome. Love it. Love that enthusiasm. What role do white abalone play in the California coastal ecosystem?
So our leader, Kristen, calls them the Zambonis of the ocean floor, which is really what they are. They like go around and they clear patches of algae or kelp, and that allows for other things to grow into those places. They also compete with things like sea urchins for food, and sea urchins also eat kelp, but they eat like the root of the kelp, the holdfast. And so if you eat just that part, then the whole thing just floats away, and they can destroy, it's called urchin barrens. They destroy like a whole kelp forest. And so they can compete with them. They're important food sources for other species like otters and fish and octopus. And they're just like a really critical part of the ecosystem. They're also a really critical part of the culture of the places where they are from. And their use in like human lives dates back thousands of years. So
cool. So when there was an industrial fishery for these animals, how, like, I always imagine abalone as being really like stuck to the rock that they're on. So how were they caught?
I mean, I never gave it much thought. I just always assumed it was scuba. I'm pretty sure it's scuba. I think, or maybe not scuba, but divers on hoses or whatever. So they have these things called ab irons, which are like often just a plastic handle with like a thick butter knife attached to it, like a really thick piece of metal. And you have to get it underneath the shell like really fast and then pop them off. And if you don't do it fast enough, or if they see you coming, or if you touch the shell with your hand first, they just clamp down and you're not getting that abalone off.
Wow, that's awesome.
Really strong.
Let's see. What are an abalone's natural predators?
So things like sea otters, where like up where we are in the Northern California, will eat abalone. The giant sea bass, other big fish, octopus are really good at prying them off. I don't know if sea stars, like really big ones, could pry them off and eat them, but a lot of things will. They're really delicious. We eat them. Yeah.
Do people in California still eat abalone?
Yes. So I got abalone from a farm just like a month ago for pizza. It was delicious. I don't think that's a normal way that people eat, but we decided to have pizza. But when people still eat abalone, at least in California, they come from aquaculture, and it's a really sustainable business. So it's a nice one to be able to get abalone from.
Very cool. So you've mentioned now white abalone, black abalone, red abalone. How many colors can there be of abalone?
So there's also pink and green, which in Spanish, so they span the coast into Mexico as well. So in Spanish, they're called blue and yellow abalone. Pink and green are blue and yellow. I don't remember. I think it's green is blue and pink is yellow. So there's those. And then the other ones are flat and pinto. So not really colors, but did I miss any? One, two. No. Okay.
Awesome. And they're mainly called the colors because that's just the color that they look like?
Yeah. So like black abalone is really obvious. It's black. Obviously people have different opinions about what blue and green and pink and yellow abalone look like. But those ones are kind of like a mix of like bluish, greenish, pink colors. Yeah, red abalone are red, but they're also covered in a lot of stuff. So
yeah, cool. Do they pinch?
No, they don't have mouth parts that bite. They have mouth parts that scrape. And so even if they could scrape your hand, which that's never, I don't think they would ever mistake a hand for food. You wouldn't probably feel it at all. But it's kind of like they have like a row of really, really tiny, tiny teeth, and they use that to just scrape algae off rocks.
Awesome. Squid have pretty much the same thing, just inside of a beak. So let's see, how many white abalone have been born in the lab in the last year?
Okay, so we did our spawning in March, right before lockdown, and I think we had, you know what, I can't even remember it, but we get like hundreds of thousands to 1 million eggs, or more than 1 million eggs in spawning. Last year, we had one female that spawned some like millions of eggs, I think. And so we can get a ton of animals in a year, or we can get none. Sometimes we try to spawn the animals and we give them everything. They get mood lighting, they get like the temperature's perfect in there, and they just aren't in the mood.
Yeah. They're just doing their best out there,
Yeah.
So how many more white abalone do we think are out living in the wild at this point?
So it's down to less than 1% of what was there originally. It's probably like a few thousand. I might be wrong. It might be even less. I'm not sure. But what we do know is that they're really far apart. They like to live on like in deeper water and on like the islands, like the Channel Islands and things like that. So they're like not necessarily right offshore. Yeah. And then we put out, I think, 3,200 abalone in last fall.
Wow. Okay. So
And there are much more abalone that live in white abalone in captivity, even in our lab, than there are in the wild.
Cool. Let's see. So you said that abalone stick to rocks, but if there's an earthquake, will the abalone still be stuck to the rock or will the shaking knock them off?
I doubt that shaking would knock them off, but the way that earthquakes have impacted them is in California, our coastlines can be really, really steep. And they're often mud or rock slides. And so if the abalone are living right in the intertidal, so something like black abalone, they live like very shallow water, sometimes they can be smothered by those landslides. Yeah, that's a threat to them.
Yeah, poor abalone. Let's see. What's their main mode of self-defense?
Just clamping down. So they've got this the whole bottom of the animal is a really big muscle, and it just sucks down to the bottom when danger's near.
Right. How do you know when you encounter an abalone? How do you know if it's a male abalone or a female abalone?
So we can't by just looking at the shell. And what we have to do is, so if the animal's in here, they have like a little bit of muscle and we pull it back and we can actually see based on the color of the inside of the tissue. Usually females in white abalone are green, and then in males will be white. But we can be wrong. So sometimes even like the people who have been spawning them forever and have the most knowledge on males or females, sometimes we get them wrong. And sometimes we don't know until after spawning them if they're boys or girls.
Cool, thanks. Is it safe to touch an abalone, and have you ever touched one before?
So in the lab, we can handle the animals, although we try not to because we don't want to disturb them. But they can't hurt us, but we can hurt them.
Yeah.
And so it's not safe in the wild to touch an abalone for the abalone's sake, because we can transmit diseases to them or change their behavior in a way where they might get eaten by something. And it's also illegal. So you're not allowed to interact with the animals in the wild because they're all, at this point, we can't take any from the wild, so we're not allowed to touch them.
Right. Amelia, age 6, would like to know, what is the biggest snail in the world?
Oh, I don't know. The biggest abalone is 12 inches, so that's a whole foot long, and
that's pretty big.
Yeah, it can be like this, like bigger than this plate. It's amazing. It's enough to feed a family, one abalone.
Right.
I don't know what the biggest snail is in the world. They're pretty big.
I'm trying to think of a bigger one, and I got nothing.
I think that there's a giant land snail either in South America or Australia, or one of those places that has just like weird and amazing animals. And I'm pretty sure that there's like a big predatory land snail, but I can't remember what it is. I'm sorry.
There's a giant African land snail, and it is large. It's like the size of a small rabbit, but I think abalone might be bigger. but I don't really know. Okay, so we'll just chalk that up to we don't know, but there are some big snails out there. Like that. Let's see. So Carly would like to know, what is the biggest concern or threat faced in terms of putting abalone back into the wild?
They face an uphill battle. So right now, the biggest threat to the species is just that they can't make any baby abalone in the wild because they're spaced too far apart. So like low numbers, I guess you could say, is their biggest threat at the moment. Right. But we don't really know what the impacts of things like climate change and pollution are going to be on them. And so that's part of what we're doing, is investigating that. And, maybe years into the future, we'll be able to breed abalone that do better in certain conditions. I don't know. But that's one of the big threats. And in other places in the world, they're starting to see the impacts of things like climate change. Our other abalone in California, the biggest thing that hit them recently was a disease called withering syndrome. And so that was a bacteria that went inside the snails, and it basically caused them to use all their muscle tissue because they weren't getting any nutrients from their food, and they just would wither away and die. And that still exists out there to a lesser extent, but that is still a threat for the animals. Not for white abalone, they live pretty deep and in colder water, so it's not as big of a problem for them, but for other species it still is. And our kelp are disappearing, so when we have things like El Nino events, their food goes away. Right. And so that's a big problem for them as well. But there's a ton of scientists who are working on solving all these different parts of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, fingers crossed. Does their shell grow with them?
Yeah. So they, maybe because I have such a bad connection, but
I can see the lines.
Trying to see the layers. Yeah. So they're constant tissue. So the original baby abalone was right here, right at the end, and they're constantly adding new layers as they grow.
Cool. Have you ever personally caught a poacher of abalone?
No, I've never seen any poaching. I'm always on the lookout just in case, but I've never seen it. I know it can be a problem because they're very expensive. But right now, at least, maybe it's easier for people whose job it is to catch them because no one's allowed to take them at all. So
right. All right. So let's see. We've got a question here from Caitlin. Of course, abalones are endangered, and we know that abalone are eaten by humans and also used for jewelry. If you could design and implement any policy to increase respect and survival for abalones in the population, what would you do?
Well, right now, since there's no take, that's a good start. But it's a problematic good start because these animals, especially red abalone, which were fished the most recently, are really important animals to native people who live along the coasts. And so, and the reason why we can't fish for them is not because of that take. It's because of settlers that have come in and taken too many in the commercial fisheries and stuff like that. So if I were, and I'm not a policy maker, though I have interest in how policies affect abalone, I would want to design some kind of fishing policy in the future when abalone are back that enables that sustainable harvest for people whose cultures and lives have depended on this animal for a long, long time before commercial fishing destroyed it. But right now, I think they're doing all the right things, which is protecting the species, growing as many as they can, doing as much research as we can about them to learn how to solve the threats that are out there.
Cool. Yeah, that's a really important thing to take into consideration, like the historical importance to various people. That's really good. So next question, when you release the abalone into the wild, do you ever track them?
So they have little tiny tags on them that get glued onto the shell, and they're just they're not like a GPS tag or anything like that, but they're for when we go back to look at them. When divers go back to look for the abalone, they can say okay, well, these ones are part of the ones that we put out there, and here's their numbers and how many we have left, and then we can get a percentage on how many survived or how many we could find again. And so we can't you couldn't put a GPS tracker on an abalone shell. It probably wouldn't tell you that much anyway. It also would just show an abalone just sitting on a rock, I'm sure. But that's kind of what we do to track success. The thing, I guess the kind of problem with that is we put out these little animals and they hide really well. So it may be a few years before when if divers are going out even continuously looking for them before they can find them. So it's not an instantaneous thing. We can't measure success instantaneously. It's going to take like years to know which animals did well and which didn't.
Totally. Yeah. Next question. Can you tell the age of an abalone by counting those layers on their shell?
Maybe relatively, but I'm not, like, one layer is not necessarily a year. Right. So they might, if they eat really well one year and they're growing really well and there's tons of kelp for them to eat, like they may grow bigger that year than the next year. So we can say like basically bigger abalones are probably older than smaller abalones, but even in lab we know that's not true. Some of it has to do with genetics. So
totally. Same with our squid. Like some squid grow even from the same like mom and dad same like clutch of eggs. Some grow so fast and some are just like they were given all the same food, given all the same opportunities in the same tank, and some are like, nah, I'm gonna be small. And you're like, all right, well.
The same thing happens. We might have like little ones and then like ones that are like this big and they're the same exact parents, same exact situation. They have the same access to food. They'll be sitting next to each other for their whole lives. And just for some reason, some grow bigger than others. And I should say that if you want to see them, because I'm not at the lab and I can't go to the lab to show it, but if you want to see them, like on social media, on every social media, our tags are just white abalone. And there's a lot of TikTok videos right now that are really good about the showing all the different abalone. So go and check those out.
Okay, cool. Where can we find you? What's your TikTok handle?
It's I don't have one. Well, I might, but I don't use it. But I know I need to get on it. But the white abalone one is just white abalone.
Oh my God.
It might be white_abalone, but there's only one. You'll be able to find.
There's probably only one white abalone TikTok account. Well, I am going to be following them. I'm also at Sarah McAttack. I also post a lot about various different invertebrates on TikTok because why not? How are we doing on time? Oh, wow. Okay. We probably only have time for one more audience question, and then we're going to go into our last two questions. So let's see. Where are abalone hanging out when they're not on rocks?
So in the wild, they're pretty much all in rocks, in crevices. They're stuck down onto the floor. And if they weren't, they'd probably get eaten. So those are good places for them to be. The other place, where most white abalone live right now is in captivity. So they live at the Bodega Marine Lab, which is where I work. They live at all different institutions throughout the state. And I'm not going to remember them all, but some of them are like the Aquarium of the Pacific, the Monterey Bay Aquarium, I think, has some. The Cabrillo Marine Aquarium in Southern California. The NOAA's labs in Southern California. So there's lots of places there's an abalone farm that we work closely with. I don't know if they have white abalone, but they have tons of red abalone. And so they live in lots of different places that we've created for them now, so that they can grow big and strong.
Great. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So we try to keep these at 45 minutes and we have been talking about abalone for 41 minutes because abalone are the best. And I love this. So the last two questions that we always ask everyone are, one, what's something that you wish everybody in the world knew about your area of expertise, like some kind of thing within that? And then the second question is, what is something that you wish everybody in the world knew about literally anything? It can be as simple and silly or like significant as you'd like it to be.
So I wish that people knew that abalone were really cute animals. I think people would care a lot more about them because when we show people in person, like I tried to show that video of its face, when we show people in person, like, oh my God, it has a face. And we're like, yes, that's why we love them. They're so cute and so awesome. And so I wish that more people could see them. And there's really cool groups that are doing things like taking them into classrooms and things so that more people do get to see them, which will be really neat. About anything in the world. When everyone that I meet always says, like, that's not in the science world, always says to me, like, I always wanted to be a marine biologist when I grew up, and I didn't do it. And I'm like, so I kind of wish I could tell everyone, like, you could be a marine biologist, and it's really cool, and it's just as cool as you think it would be. Sometimes it's boring, but most times it's really cool. And so I kind of wish people knew that was a passion that can be followed.
Yes, it is not like saying I want to be a rock star. It is achievable. It is doable. And the world needs marine biologists, for sure.
We do.
We need them.
And most of the world is ocean, so I'm just saying, like.
Yeah, don't let your parents tell you you can't do it. You can do it. My parents told me I couldn't do it, and I did it. So
same.
Great. Sounds good. Okay, well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to plug, places we can find you on social media, etc.?
Well, you can learn a lot more about white abalone from the white abalone handles. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Or there might even be others that I don't know about because I'm all of whatever. But yeah, there's tons of videos you can learn about us making new baby abalone, what they eat, people taking care of them. Our team has been doing a lot of virtual tours now that we're all stuck at home, and so you can follow us, and sometimes we go live every couple of weeks, and you can ask questions about the team there too.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you
Erin,
so much.
Thank you for being with us and signing. Let's see, other stuff. Oh, if you weren't here right at the beginning, let me tell you about the sessions we've got next week. On Monday, Dr. Latasia Sherry Jones is going to be joining us doing science that you can do from your kitchen. And so things you can use around the house to do science experiments with the family at home. It's going to be awesome. She's an amazing science communicator. She's a neuroscientist, and she's an If-Then STEM ambassador, which is a very cool program that we'll hear more about on Monday. On Tuesday, the 19th at 1 p.m., we're going to be talking with Devika Varma about vaccines. And then on the 22nd, which is Friday, we're going to be talking about geology, specifically all about mountains, with Stacy Phillips, who participated yesterday in our No Time Like the Presentation celebration. And she's an amazing communicator, and it's going to be good. All next week is, generally speaking, like, it's going to be good stuff. So please join us. If you can support our program, we're totally donor supported, and every little bit helps. Like, almost all of our donors are giving us like $5 here, $5 there, and that's how we operate. So if you can afford to support us, please do. You can do that at Skype or paypal.me/SkypeAScientist, or become a monthly supporter at patreon.com/SkypeAScientist. Every like $1 a month person adds up, and we appreciate every single person who supports us so much. So that's all we've got from me. Thank you again, Alyssa, for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you so
Erin
much
for helping make us so accessible. And we'll see y'all next week. Bye.